That was incredible! Starship launched Flight 6 and it didn't go quite perfectly. But what does that mean? Is SpaceX advancing, or was this a step back? How did the launch go? Why did they try to break the ship? And why was a banana involved? Here's the complete breakdown of SpaceX's Starship Flight 6. Enjoy! My name is Felix, welcome to What About It, let's go for a launch. Starship updates. They actually managed to do it again. After only a little over a month, SpaceX has once again shown why it is the space industry leader. Starship, the world's largest and most powerful rocket, has launched for a 6th time in a record amount of time, beating the previous record turnaround time for a Super Heavy class launch vehicle set by the Saturn V in 1969. This is the first step towards SpaceX's goal of rapid launch cadence for the world's largest rocket. SpaceX has put a lot of work into getting this far, and they didn't just get here overnight. Although some things were done practically overnight. When we last left this vehicle, it still had one more test to complete before it could launch. And SpaceX decided to fast-track that test. The WDR, or wet dress rehearsal for Starship, had yet to be completed, and with the days ticking down till launch, this needed to get done fast. For previous launches, it took about a week between a WDR and liftoff. However, with the launch date set for the 18th, the flight was less than a week away by the time the ship was finally stacked on top of the booster on the 14th. And it seemed SpaceX wasn't in a hurry to get this wet dress rehearsal out of the way, as shortly after the ship was stacked, we saw a road closure scheduled for the 17th, specifically for non-flight testing. This meant SpaceX planned to test the vehicle and launch it within about 24 hours. What? Or at least that was the case. The next day, an update to the SpaceX website revealed that the launch had slipped by a day to the 19th, meaning teams now had around 48 hours to complete it. Well, that's a lot of time. No, it isn't. This was more time, however, it was still much less than on previous flights. While that doesn't seem super unusual, between the test and the launch, SpaceX also needs to destack the ship yet again so that teams can install and arm the flight termination system. However, it turns out SpaceX had already done this. It's hard to tell exactly when, but we were able to catch some work on the ship shortly before stacking on the 14th, which is likely when the flight termination system was armed. Doing this means SpaceX was able to save a bit of time. However, it can be a bit more dangerous, as it means the vehicle has explosives loaded on it while it's fueled for a wet dress rehearsal. However, that wasn't a problem, and this partial fill appears to have gone perfectly, as Xpost said that all systems were ready for launch on the 19th. With the wet dress rehearsal out of the way, everything was ready for launch. Fortunately for this one, the license had already been pre-approved along with the Flight 5 license, meaning SpaceX could do it as fast as they wanted and didn't need to wait at all. So we had a fully stacked and tested vehicle with its flight termination system installed, all licenses approved, and all restrictions filed, meaning all that was left now was to wait for the weather. It's been just over a month since the last incredible Starship launch, and what a wild ride it's been. We've had some unpredictable weather since then, especially with Hurricane Milton rolling through right before the launch. Thankfully, we stayed prepared, and on top of it all, thanks to my radar. During Hurricane Milton, I tracked the storm in real time using my radar. The app was a lifesaver, informing us about the storm's impact as it moved across the Space Coast. Here's a quick look back at Milton's trajectory. You can see how it passed right over the Space Coast just before the Starship launch. Right over our house. My radar gave us advanced warnings, allowing us to prepare and still make the launch stream happen while tracking the Starship at the same time. My radar isn't just for hurricanes. We used it to track weather risks for our 24/7 cameras and to keep the Y team at Starbase safe. Leading up to the launch, we monitored the weather closely with my radar, which helped us track the clear skies that followed. It's incredible how much planning goes into launching a Starship and handling severe weather back to back. With my radar, you can track storms, set up custom alerts, monitor wildfires, and even follow orbital objects like Mars rovers, which is easily my favorite feature. So whether you're gearing up for a rocket launch or staying ahead of the weather, my radar has got you covered. Click the link in the description to download it for free and stay informed about what's coming your way. I'm so done with this. So much for the weather, and on the 19th, at a reasonable time for once, we were ready. On the afternoon of the 19th at about 3 p.m. local time, fueling began on the ship just 50 minutes before T-0, now set to 4 o'clock on the dot. The countdown began and we watched with bated breath as the clock approached 0. Then, with just 3 minutes until launch, the propellant load was finally completed, with the vehicle sporting a nice layer of frost caused by moisture in the air freezing to the side of the cryogenic tanks. This process went off without a hitch, showing just how far the Starship program has come. Despite the few repairs after Flight 5, the ground support equipment did its job flawlessly, which is an amazing sign for future development. We quickly approached the T-42nd mark, waiting to see if SpaceX would decide to hold at this point or go for it. The flight's launch window was short, only around 30 minutes, meaning any issues risked a full day of delays. But there were no problems, and the countdown breezed past as the clock quickly reached its next milestone at T-30 seconds. The flight director said the 3 words every spaceflight fan wants to hear: go for launch. It was go time. Even though it's only 30 seconds between the final confirmation of launch and liftoff, it feels like an eternity with all the anticipation. Eventually, we see a flood of water launched into the air by the deluge system and then ignition. All 33 of the world's most advanced methane-fueled full-flow staged combustion cycle Raptor engines light with incredible force, shaking the ground at Starbase as the engines spool up to full power. Then the hold-down clamps are released, and liftoff it is. Starship flies yet again as the rocket quickly leaps off the pad, scorching everything beneath. Fortunately, all 33 Raptor engines successfully lit before the ascent, showing that the failed engine we saw on Flight 4 was just one small hiccup. We've seen Starship go through this part of flight several times now, but it is still an incredible sight. Thanks to Redline helicopter tours, we could see this launch from the air and possibly get the best views of it. Starship quickly ascends into the air, eventually reaching max Q when a rocket experiences the highest amount of aerodynamic stress during liftoff at T+1 minute into flight. A minute and a half later, the booster's job is done and it's time for the Starship upper stage to continue without it. So all but the center 3 booster engines cut off, and then 7 seconds later, Starship lights its own Raptor engines while it is still atop the booster, sending it on its way to space. Hot staging is still one of the most mesmerizing parts of a flight, as the hot exhaust gases interact with the booster while it is thousands of feet in the air. But that wasn't all we were going to see from this booster. Super Heavy isn't just any old rocket booster. Now it is time to show if it can live up to its predecessor, Booster 12. It's time for a landing. Immediately after hot staging, the booster's hot gas reaction control thrusters ignite and the center 3 Raptor engines, which are still lit, adjust to flip the booster around before the middle ring of 10 Raptor engines relight and send it straight back to the launch pad. This boost back burn lasts nearly an entire minute as the booster cancels out and reverses all of its horizontal velocity to ensure it can make it back instead of landing in the middle of the ocean. Then, after its engines finally get a chance to rest, the hot staging ring is jettisoned. It later splashes down just off the coast of Starbase to be fished out. The booster slowly flips itself back around to ensure that the engines, which are all shielded, face the heat of re-entry. During the last flight, the nozzles of some of the outer engines didn't hold up to the heat quite as well as SpaceX had hoped. It appears likely that they changed the booster's trajectory during re-entry to spread the heat out over a longer period, reducing the heating on those engines. There are likely also a few other changes SpaceX has made, and hopefully they all paid off. You can clearly see just how hot this engine bay gets as the booster screams back into the atmosphere, glowing red hot as it burns off as much velocity as possible. Despite the earlier boost back burn, there was still a chance that this booster would land in the water. If mission control or the onboard computer determined anything was wrong with the booster, it would automatically adjust its trajectory to land in the water instead. Unfortunately, that appears to have been the case. While we were watching this beast begin its re-entry phase of flight, we heard the commentators say that SpaceX would not be attempting to catch this booster. This was unfortunate, but it's better to be safe than sorry, especially as this is the only launch pad SpaceX has, and they've already proven they can catch a booster. While it's sad to see this booster go, catching it was only a secondary goal for this flight, and SpaceX will have more than enough chances to catch a booster in the future. And besides, just because SpaceX wasn't going to catch it doesn't mean we weren't going to get a show, as this booster was still targeting just off the shore of Starbase. Since SpaceX decided to abort the catch, you'd think that this booster was just going to explode instantly or something when they tried to relight its engines, but something interesting happened instead. But before I tell you more about that booster, we've looked into our channel metrics and there are over 2 million returning monthly viewers who have not subscribed yet. Help us improve the channel even further by double checking that you've hit that subscribe button so you don't miss our updates. And while you're at it, give us a like and become a wise supporter. Why? Because you'll gain access to a massive amount of extra content. With it, you get access to daily new Starbase photo galleries, including all those we posted so far, satellite, aerial and ground photos, more than 400 posts in the past 2 years alone, with up to 7 picture galleries per week, insights, chats with me, you name it. Also check out our print store at shop.whataboutit.space to buy a picture for your favorite wall and support our photographers directly. Thank you so much, you rock. Now back to the booster. As it plummeted towards the ocean, rapidly dropping its altitude, we held our breath to see just how far this booster would make it. Everything appeared to go incredibly up to engine ignition, with all 4 chines even being intact, meaning this booster was already in better shape than booster 12 from Flight 5 was at this point. And then we saw it. The middle 13 Raptor engines light up perfectly just a kilometer above the surface of the water, rapidly slowing the booster down. As it approaches the water, the middle ring of 10 engines shuts down, leaving the entire gigantic rocket stage to be propelled by just the center 3 Raptor engines. Looking at the booster during this point in flight, we can also clearly see that everything is going perfectly. Despite being over the water, the booster can clearly be seen performing its transitioning maneuver as though it was landing in the arms of the chopsticks. When viewing this footage, imagine a tower sitting atop the water. See what I mean? Simulated landing surface. You can see it slowly lowering itself as if performing a trust fall. Unfortunately though, no one was there to catch it as it splashed into the Gulf of Mexico. SpaceX cuts away from those cameras during the livestream right as we see the booster beginning to tip over. Looking at this, it shows that the booster did in fact explode when it tipped over. This is an incredible sight, but it's unfortunate that the booster appears to be in perfect health before it explodes. From what we can tell, this booster was in even better shape than booster 12 during its landing. We didn't even see a flamethrower coming out of the quick disconnect, and again, all 4 chines appear to be intact. The booster would have likely been almost entirely ready for reuse if they had caught it. Unfortunately, that was not the case with this booster, so why wasn't that the case, and why didn't SpaceX decide to catch it? It looks like booster 13 was up for the task, which means either a sensor was not reporting the right data at the right time, or the catch tower had a problem. It does appear that the launch tower took a bit more of a beating this time than during previous flights. The lightning rod on top suffered damage and bent during liftoff. And sure enough, when SpaceX released their statement about Flight 6, they confirmed that the catch tower caused the abort. Another important thing is to note that SpaceX spent a lot of time on the abort scenarios and when it would be best to abort or attempt to catch, as revealed in a briefing that Musk shared alongside some gameplay footage. Want a game? Look at Falcon 9 for comparison and to give you an idea of whether SpaceX was lucky. Directly after its first successful landing, Falcon 9 also had a failed landing. Many of its early landing attempts ended in failure. However, nowadays, if a landing attempt fails, it's big news because of how reliable it's become. After all, this is still a prototype test program and SpaceX has likely learned a great deal even from this splashdown. They now know what needs to be improved for future flights. Despite what the headlines may say, this is a complete success, especially since no other company is even close to attempting something like this. It is clear that the booster had a pretty good chance of successfully landing. While the booster was on its way to the water, the ship took a different journey. Its engines continued burning until about 8.5 minutes into flight. Once again, the ship successfully completed its roughly 6-minute burn to place it on a near-orbital trajectory. Keep in mind, this is the 4th time in a row that SpaceX has achieved this, and any arguments that Starship is just a concept that will never be achievable can be put to rest. Even if Starship stops development right here, it's already reached roughly the same point as Falcon 9. You know, while being around 10 times as powerful. However, Starship is still very much in development because SpaceX has some big goals for this vehicle. That's why we were watching the ship so closely, and this time we got to watch a new treat as SpaceX was finally able to perform its in-space Raptor relight demo. This is a demo that had been planned for all flights until Flight 3 had a slight malfunction with the reaction control system, forcing the maneuver to be aborted. After that, this maneuver wasn't even planned on Flights 4 and 5, however Starship needs to complete this for one important reason. If Starship can't reliably relight its engine in space, then SpaceX doesn't want to place it into a full orbit, as it would not be able to bring itself down safely and could risk crashing into inhabited areas. It's the last thing Starship needs to complete before it can enter a full orbit and deploy payloads. While waiting for this to happen, we got some incredible onboard views of the ship, including some incredible scenes of it passing over a lightning storm. And we saw a banana. Why did we see a banana? Precisely on time, SpaceX switched to an onboard camera inside the engine bay and relit one of the Center 3 sea-level Raptor engines as predicted. While these are less efficient in vacuum, their placement near the center of mass and gimbaling capabilities mean they can light single engines without risking sending the Starship into an uncontrollable tumble. This burn went flawlessly, which means Starship is now ready to begin its full orbital launches, hopefully starting with Flight 7 and Ship 33. But this Starship wasn't in an orbit, and its altitude rapidly decreased as it began to hit some of the upper atmosphere. Despite the atmosphere density up here being close to a vacuum because of the speed Starship is traveling at, even that is enough to cause heating. Heating would be extremely important with this flight, as SpaceX wanted to test Starship to its limits. They implemented numerous tests to stress the vehicle as much as possible. The plan was to break it. During the livestream, the commentators confirmed that this heat shield was still the original version 1. It was less advanced than the one on Flight 5 and only had upgrades in specific areas, such as the flap hinges. SpaceX also decided to remove large sections of tiles on the edges of the heat shield, with the commentators even stating during the re-entry that they had removed over 2,100 tiles from the ship. This will enable SpaceX to one day catch the ship, as the area where these tiles were removed is where the chopsticks will hit during a catch. Simply put, having a heat shield in these areas would require a redesign of the chopsticks. They also stated that they had changed the angle of attack for the ship during re-entry to be much steeper, which would stress the ship far beyond anything it had felt before, and in some cases even past its design requirements. They wanted to test the ship to its breaking point and were doing their best to see how far they could push it. In other words, they were actively trying to create a catastrophe to find the design's failure point. But the ship had other plans. We watched as the ship slammed into the atmosphere, rapidly heating up and glowing red hot. Sparks could be seen flying off from all over the ship, which is not a good sign. This heat shield is supposed to stay completely intact during re-entry, and any sparks that you see aren't exactly good. In fact, at one point you can even see what appears to be a whole tile flying off and impacting the edge of one of the flap hinges. This was a spicy re-entry, as hot as Thai food. As the ship got hotter and hotter, it looked like it was only a matter of time before the signal cut out. Except it didn't. Despite some warping in some areas which mainly appeared to be superficial and some slight burn through around the flaps, the ship was doing fantastic. The flap hinges were doing better than ever, with almost no burn through visible anywhere, meaning the fixes they implemented around those hinges did very well. The ship kept descending through the atmosphere, rapidly bleeding off speed and altitude until eventually the red-hot glow turned into the gentle blue of an afternoon sky. Ship did it, it managed to survive. However, this wasn't over yet. Unlike on previous flights, the ship reached its terminal velocity much higher in the atmosphere at around 20 kilometers. This is because of the angle of attack that the ship took. It decelerated quicker and transitioned into a skydiver-like fall high up in the atmosphere. This reminded me a lot of the high-altitude flight tests that started with SN8. SpaceX also wanted to run other tests to stress the aerodynamic surfaces to their limits. Even now, they were still doing everything possible to break this ship. Next were the flaps. How much force can the flaps take, you ask? All of it. They couldn't do it. The ship kept blasting through the atmosphere as it quickly descended, passing through cloud layers. At some point, they even forced the ship's nose down to give the flaps as much stress as possible. To no effect, ship didn't care. All 3 Raptor engines lit up for the final landing burn as it aggressively flipped around before reducing to just 2 engines and then approaching the ocean's surface. This time, because it was a daytime landing, we could see it all perfectly clearly through the buoy and a possible helicopter or airplane camera as the ship splashed down before tipping over. Unfortunately, the tipping over and slamming into the water was a bit much for the ship's structure, as after everything it had been through, it finally snapped in half upon contact with the ocean. This time, there weren't any major visible fireballs, but rather just some buckling around the payload bay, and there would appear to be cracks near the fuel tanks. This landing could not have gone better. SpaceX did everything possible to break this ship, yet ship made it look easy. Considering how much SpaceX was testing and how far they were pushing this ship, its survival is a testament to the design and shows that not only is the ship a sound design, but it's also reliable. So far, every attempted re-entry where the heat shield was used was a success. Despite melted flaps and chipped tiles, the ships have managed to splash down every time. It's clear that Starship is not just some far-fetched dream, but rather a not-too-distant reality that is fast approaching with every passing day. Last but not least, I'd like to remember a hero today. A hero for all plants and fruits out there. All you vitamin-providing fellows out there can be very proud. SpaceX sent a banana to space as a payload for this flight. Even a dedicated banana cam was installed, showing this heroic fruit suspended on cables in the middle of Ship 31's payload bay during the flight. We watched in awe, we cheered for the fruit. It survived the launch, froze in space, was baked during re-entry, and made it back down. An unknown and unnamed banana was the quiet hero of Flight 6, inspiring fruits and plants everywhere to dream of a life far beyond the produce aisle. All hail the Space Chiquita. That's it. That's all I got. That's it for today. Remember to smash that like button, subscribe for more. This is what fuels the algorithm. This is how you can help us for free. Check out our epic shirts in your favorite Space Nerd store. A new Raptor design and our epic brand new Flight 6 design with a banana for scale are both up. The perfect Christmas gift, and we have a 15% sale on everything until the 24th. Link is in the description and in the card you should see now. And if you want to train your space IQ even further, watch this video next to continue your journey. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you again in the next episode.
Bananas blaze, starships rise.